Okay, so picture this. It's the height of the Victorian era, and the British Empire is the undisputed superpower of the world. But on one remote hill in South Africa, it suffered one of its most stunning and absolute defeats. We're going to dive into the Battle of Majuba Hill, the final, shocking clash of the First Boer War. And look, this wasn't just some minor setback. For an empire that prided itself on military might, Majuba Hill was a deep, painful humiliation. In fact, historians have called it one of the single most humiliating defeats in all of British military history. That's a shockwave that would be felt for decades to come. So that's the big question we're tackling here, right? How on earth did a highly trained, professional British army get so completely outfought and outsmarted by a much smaller group of Boer citizen soldiers? All right, so let's set the scene. It's the night of February 26th, 1881. It's dark, it's stormy, and the British commander is about to make a decision that is going to seal his fate and the fate of his men. This right here is Major General Sir George Pomeroy Colley. Now, he's feeling the pressure. He's anxious to make a bold move, to show the Boers who's boss. So he decides to seize the high ground, the summit of Majuba Hill. He figured it'd be a simple power play, a show of force that would make the enemy just pack up and leave. Colley's whole strategy was built on some, let's say, very shaky assumptions. He looked at that steep hill and thought, there's no way the Boers can attack us up here. He was convinced that just by being up there, looking down on them, he would break their morale. He completely underestimated them. And this is where that overconfidence really starts to cause problems. His own officers advised against it, but Colley didn't bring any heavy guns up the hill. And even worse, he didn't tell his 405 soldiers to dig trenches or build any kind of defenses. He honestly believed the hill itself was all the protection they would need. But here's the thing. Colley's biggest mistake wasn't just underestimating the Boers. It was completely misunderstanding the ground he was standing on. That hill wasn't a fortress. It was about to become the Boers' greatest weapon. The shape of the hill, that's the real key to this whole battle. See how the slopes kind of bulge outwards? That's what we call a convex slope. And it meant that the soldiers standing on the summit, well, they couldn't actually see the ground for hundreds of yards below them. It created these massive, dangerous blind spots. In military terms, this is what's known as dead ground. It's an area you can't see and you can't shoot into. For the Boers, it was a hidden highway all the way up the mountain. For the British, it was a death trap. To see anything, a soldier would have to stand up, expose his whole body, and get silhouetted against the sky, a perfect target for the marksman below. And the Boers, they figured this out immediately. They launched this brilliant two-part attack. First, their best shots positioned themselves at the bottom and just started picking off any British soldier who dared to peek over the edge. Then, under the cover of that fire, small teams of Boers used all that dead ground to climb the hill, totally unseen. And this is where that illusion of safety just completely shatters. The British position went from what they thought was a secure fortress to an absolute killing ground in just a matter of minutes. There's a really telling moment here. A young lieutenant, a guy named Ian Hamilton, who would later become a really famous general, he saw the Boers creeping up. He tried to warn General Colley not once, not twice, but 4 times. And what happened? He was basically told to shut up and stop worrying. The arrogance at the top was just staggering. So when the Boers finally poured over the crest of the hill, the British were caught completely flat-footed. Their rifles were set for long-range targets, but now the fighting was practically face-to-face. They ended up shooting high, right over the Boers' heads. And that hollow area in the middle, where Colley had placed his reserves for safety, it instantly became a trap, with Boers firing down into it from the high ground they'd just captured. And at that moment, it was all over. The British line just broke. Facing an enemy that seemed to appear out of nowhere, with commands getting lost in the confusion, discipline completely collapsed. It turned into a desperate, panicked scramble to get off that hill. And the results? Just look at the numbers. They tell you everything you need to know. The British Empire lost 92 men killed, with nearly 200 more wounded or captured. On the other side, the Boers lost 1 man, and had just 5 wounded. It was an absolute rout. And in the middle of all that chaos, General Colley himself, the man whose arrogance had led to this whole disaster, was shot and killed trying to fight his way out. His death was really the final punctuation mark on a total and complete defeat. But here's the thing. The story of Majuba Hill didn't end when the shooting stopped. Not even close. Its legend was just beginning, and it was a legend that would haunt the British Empire for a long, long time. The defeat was so total, so absolute, that it literally ended the war. The British were forced to the negotiating table, and they signed a peace treaty that was a huge knock to their global prestige. It sent a message to the world: the mighty British Army wasn't invincible after all. For the British Army, the name Majuba became a source of deep shame. For years, "Remember Majuba" was a bitter rallying cry, a promise that they would one day get their revenge for the humiliation they suffered on that hill. And that brings us to the big historical debate. How much did this one battle on this one hill really matter in the grand scheme of things? Was it a genuine crack in the foundation of the British Empire? Well, historians are kind of split on this. On one side, you have the argument that this was a massive turning point. I mean, this was the first time since the American Revolution that Britain had been forced into a peace treaty it didn't want. It showed the empire could be beaten. But then, there's the other side, which says it was just a temporary blip, that most people back in Britain barely even noticed, and that the empire kept growing for decades, eventually winning the territory back anyway. So whether it was the beginning of the end or just a painful but temporary lesson, the story of Majuba Hill is this incredible case study in how arrogance and tactics can change history in a single afternoon. And it leaves us with this one final question: how much can one battle on one hill really change the fate of an entire empire?